Stan the pervert is destined to have offspring different from ordinary people. When Haley first entered adolescence, she made a fuss about getting her period, about her breasts stopping development, and even about getting pimples. Francine and Stan had struggled through Haley's adolescence, and life had finally returned to normal. But today, Steve's adolescence has arrived. He excitedly took off his pants in front of everyone, although Francine pretended to be happy for Steve on the surface. When the two returned to the bedroom, they immediately felt scared. They had suffered so much during Haley's adolescence and were completely unprepared for Steve's. Francine wished Steve could stay 14 years old longer, but Stan hoped Steve could skip adolescence altogether. While the two were brainstorming solutions, Steve was already preparing to throw away his toys. Francine was terrified by Steve's changes. When Steve put on mature clothes and went to school, he immediately approached Lisa, the prettiest girl in school, and asked her out before she could react. Surprisingly, Lisa agreed. Steve left happily, wiggling his waist. Meanwhile, Francine went to the CIA's top-secret lab. She had learned from Stan that the CIA had been developing anti-aging drugs. To get the drug, Francine brought the cake she made, and the scientist next to her immediately used a robot to snatch the cake. Thus, Francine successfully obtained the drug. While Steve was asleep, she injected all the drug into his body. At dinner, Steve angrily stormed into the kitchen. Faced with Steve's questioning, Francine had to tell the truth. She just wanted Steve to stay 14 longer. To make up for her mistake, Stan decided to go to the lab to get the antidote. Suddenly, Steve remembered something important. He was supposed to meet Lisa at the mall. Accompanied by Francine, the two went to the mall. Although Steve didn't want to be with his mother, he couldn't reach the elevator buttons because of his height. Lisa had been waiting for a long time. When she saw Steve's appearance, she thought she had been tricked. Steve tried to explain in a panic, but Lisa couldn't understand his words, and only took him for his nephew. Angrily, Lisa left. When Steve was asleep, Stan finally brought the antidote, but Francine didn't expect that Stan didn't plan to let Steve return to adolescence. When Steve woke up, he would be 21. Stan had already prepared to welcome the new Steve. Neither of them expected that the CIA had mixed up the drugs again. Now Steve was 80 years old. Stan decided to go back to the lab, but just then, Klaus brought good news. Lisa decided to give Steve another chance. Steve went to the restaurant at 80. Before he could say a few words, Lisa left angrily. Francine took Steve home, and this time Stan brought the real antidote. He thought it was time for Steve to return to the dreaded adolescence, but Steve secretly ran away and boarded a retirement bus. Stan and Francine searched every corner of the house, until Roger brought news of Steve. He said he would spend the rest of his life in a nursing home. As Steve was preparing to enjoy his old age, Stan called. Steve confessed his anxiety. He didn't want his growth process to be so difficult. While Steve was resting, Stan and Francine came to the nursing home. To help Steve return to adolescence, they took him to a dance hall. Lisa was waiting alone in the hall, and the person she was waiting for was Steve. Although the road through adolescence is full of confusion and troubles, it also holds beauty. Stan injected the antidote into Steve again, and thus, Steve successfully went on a date with Lisa.